Yeah, it's got a really great side order of dystopia. You should so go there.
I preferred the film.
Because it's fucking true and therefore utterly terrifying. Do you not just like absolutely viscerally despise it, like absolutely hate it, when there's a book that you're really looking forward to reading for a very specific reason or mood and it doesn't work, it just falls flat, you're disappointed, you feel lied to? But it's no one's fault, really. You just kind of misunderstood what the book was about, and it wasn't even a bad book, so you can't give it a bad review. It's one of the most frustrating experiences as a reader, but the tonic that I have found to really put goo on the wound, balm the soul, isn't to give the book a bad review, isn't to reprimand that friend that gave you the review, but to go in search of that true book. The book that you thought that book was, but wasn't actually the book. How is this becoming a relationship analogy? When the boy next door turns out to be 2 doors down, maybe it's time to chase down Mr. Darcy and find out he's quite a nice man, really. Where am I going with this? Well, I have compiled a list of books that I feel are slightly misrepresented in their hype. Not that they're bad, but there is something that either I think people go looking for, or I have gone looking for in these books that hasn't been found. And I have set up almost a table of translation, like, were you looking for this? I think you actually need this. I'm here today to rid you of your Mr. Wickhams and give you what you actually deserve, which is a really good book. Now, none of the books on this list are bad books. Some of them I enjoyed, some of them I didn't enjoy, but they definitely weren't what I was expecting. And I often realised that I already had something in my collection, or I went on to read something later down the line that I was like, oh, this is what I thought that book, oh, but it was actually this. The first book that came to mind for me was Conversations with Friends. Now, as a huge fan of normal people, to the point where I made a whole video on normal people, I was very disappointed to discover that Conversations with Friends really just wasn't for me. What I was looking for was perhaps some poetic language to understand like the 20s struggle, and or something quite relatable and honest and raw, and the characters didn't have to be likeable, but they certainly needed to feel real. If you were disappointed with Conversations with Friends, 2 books I would really recommend is Treats by Lara Williams. Treats is a short story collection about dating and the heartbreaks of friendship and just kind of like being a millennial, and it felt like somebody had opened a lift shaft in my heart. Like, it made my stomach sink with how accurate and beautifully written it was, and I think that that's kind of what I went looking for again in Conversations with Friends and didn't quite find it, which was okay. Love Sally Rooney as a writer, Normal People as a work of art. I will not be swayed on that fact. But I realised that I'd already found that in Treats, and I'd also say maybe Animals by Emma Jane Unsworth, again, like, incredible book. But also, if you're looking at something that maybe might be a little bit more down to earth, less, do you know what I think the thing that bothered me about Conversations with Friends is that it was very great Gatsby-esque in like its characters. These are completely so thoroughly unlikable and so thoroughly privileged and careless that while I think that's probably very interesting for some people to read about, I am just so sick of reading about. I didn't want to anymore. And Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams is an excellent anecdote to that. It's very modern and honest and brutal, but also really beautiful, and also portrays really that friendship element to dating, the way you get on with your friends and how that relates to your dating world. It's really, for me, a much more down-to-earth, like, modern portrayal of some of those difficulties. And as I said before, the friendships in this were what were particularly interesting to me. Next, The Night Circus. This book is a huge bestseller, and I thought it was fine. It really is a fine book. It's fine. It's fine. But I think what I went looking for in it that I didn't quite get was the really immersive aspect of being in a circus, because it obviously is this framing of the circus, and the plot to me was quite confusing and quite convoluted. But what instead I realised when I was reading it I was interested in, and why I was getting frustrated with it, because often it's not what the writers are doing that is frustrating or bad, it's just that your expectation and the places that you want to spend time in the plot are just very different. Where I wanted to spend time was with the people that were in the circus and the kind of complicated intricacies of what being in a circus and being displayed means, and like a real interrogation of that, like the ways that can break apart and the ways that can come together. 2 books that really did that for me that I discovered were The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan. She's a really incredible writer. This is a book about a floating circus in a kind of ethereal world. It's heavily focused on the atmosphere of the circus and also the kind of relationships between the characters and how that ebbs and drifts on this like very symbolic ocean. And it's a really incredible, like very, I'd say it's a little bit more literary in the way it's written, whilst also having that escapism that so many people love about the Night Circus. And then also Geek Love by Catherine Dunn is one of my favourite books of all time. And it's about, well, I guess for me, it's about the messed up gaze of the public when it comes to what is other and what we will pay to see as entertaining. How many air quotes can I do? We're walking in the air quotes. It's about a kind of socially generated, I guess, family of freaks because the mum and dad decide that they're both performers and they want to start their own circus, so they take loads of experimental drugs so that their children are born in a way that other people will stare at them on purpose, let's put it like that. And it's the tension in that family between being seen as an export, being children of people who have kind of almost engineered you as other for financial gain, and how damaging that can be, but also empathetically trying to understand parents who, I think the mum says at one point, like, I can't think of being able to give my children a better gift than being able to live from just being themselves. For me, it's a really intelligent exploration of the misguided ways we try and protect people or put people on pedestals to look at, and how complicated that is, and how the way we see disfigurement and difference needs to morph as humanity hopefully gets kinder and better. The next one was Station 11. This might surprise you because I really love the book Station 11, but the first time I read it, I got my little knickers in a twist, didn't I? Because it wasn't really what I felt like I had been sold. I originally had the American cover, which looks like this. The selling point, or at least the part of the blurb that I zoomed in on, which on reflection is what I was doing, there is other stuff in the blurb and in fact way more stuff in the book, was this band of, supposed to be after this pandemic happens and the world is in this really dystopian state, and there's this band of thespians who wander this new abandoned dystopian America performing Shakespeare's plays. And I was like, yes, give it to me, amazing. That is in the book. There is so much more that is not focused on that. And that was fine, actually, on reflection. You know, you kind of, when you come back to a book after a few months, you're like, oh my God, this is a work of art, one of the best books I've ever read. Major seal claps. But at the time I was like, but I just wanted to spend more time with the circus people and the theatre people. I wanted to hear more about Othello and King Lear. If you're going to that book focused on having all of your dreams crushed, but in the most beautiful way ever, then you'll probably find what you're looking for. But if you're looking for more of that whimsical, what's it like to be in a travelling band of theatre people wandering around kind of thing, then there's two books I'd recommend. King of Shadows by Susan Cooper is like a kind of middle grade book I used to absolutely love as a kid. And it's about this teenage boy, right? And he is playing in a very, like, trying to be as accurate as possible reenactment of two of Shakespeare's plays. One of them is Midsummer Night's Dream, and I can't remember what the other one is. But before he actually performs the plays, he gets transported back to the actual first performance of Midsummer Night's Dream and plays under the actual William Shakespeare as his director, and it's really immersive. And there is like a really cool twist at the end of like why it happened. It does actually explain like the logic behind the magic. And if you're a fan of Shakespeare but you don't want to like have like an annoying modern retelling of Shakespeare, but you would like to experience like a modern day book discussing the themes of Shakespeare and how that plays out, I think it's a really cool time travel book. And then also for the more of like the merry band of misfits wandering around a more dystopian society, I would highly recommend Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn. This is a YA book set in revolutionary France about 4 queer characters. They're from both sides of the political spectrum, but for whatever reason their parents have either been guillotined or they are captured in some way, and they are trying to survive in this very tumultuous political period whilst also trying to rescue people and do the best for people. And it's so wholesome and lovely and atmospheric. And I think that might fill the hole in your heart that maybe Station 11 left if you weren't getting what you expected. I think though the UK cover tells a much better story in the blurb and also in the cover of what this book actually is. And I think it's more that I bought the American version because that's what I wanted to believe the book was. But I should have believed the British. Damn it. How to Fall in Love by Cecilia Ahern. Ahern. I used to read a lot of Cecilia's books. I'm saying it like we know each other, we don't. When I was like a kid, because I kind of ran out of books that I was interested in the children's section, and I'd go into the adult section and read like some romance books. So I actually read like When Rainbows End and a few others. I don't really remember, when I was maybe about 12. But I recently read, I think about a year or so ago, I read like How to Fall in Love. It was sold as a romance, but also featured like discussions of mental health and depression. But it actually turned out to be more like, for me, a kind of like frustrating trope about how a man was suicidal, but then because he fell in love, his mental health problems went away. And seeing many a rom-com like that fucked me up as a teenager, so I just wish it didn't have that in it. And something that I'd really recommend to people if they're finding that some of these romance books hold some kind of damaging tropes that aren't like inherently bad to write about, but you're kind of just like, I don't need this, please. Some ones that really, I think, have really healthy relationships in them and really model the nuances of like modern day discussions about mental health, sexism, gaslighting, toxic relationships, is Mari McFarlane's work, who I've talked about a lot on this channel before, but any book by her, I've read them all, I've checked them all, they're all great. It's really a good remedy if you're somebody who wants to read essentially a rom-com in book form, but wants it to feel like up to date and modern on the kind of like discussions people are having around relationship tropes that really do happen, so should be allowed to exist in literature, but like I just want to avoid them for my brain needs like a 10-year break. The Uninhabitable Earth, the book that keeps on giving. Many of you will know that I've mentioned this in many videos. Have I finished it? No, because it's fucking true and therefore utterly terrifying. Brilliant. This book is about pain. This book is like probably, as everybody says, essential reading, but also if you're somebody who feels incredibly anxious about the planet, is incredibly stressful to read. Instead, I might recommend, let me just get it from the shelf. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to read that book eventually, but instead I would recommend for now, if you're struggling to get through it, The Story of More by Hope Jahren, How We Got to Climate Change and Where We Go From Here. This is a really well-written book, split up into chapters, that serves you the facts in a very coherent way, but also offers some of the solutions alongside the facts. So you're not just constantly like, oh my God, this is so unsolvable. And it helped me as well because instead of it being more of like because I feel like The Uninhabitable Earth is very much a science and nature writing based like meander through the facts. Like it kind of like is one narrative. This is more like bite-sized chunks organised by theme. Neither framework is better or worse, but just for me and my brain, this was much easier to process while also not holding back and still telling me the grim truths. There's a section on food, growing grain, raising meat, finding fish. There's a section on energy, there's a section on weather, and there's a section on consumerism. I highlighted loads of facts in this. I found it really easy to reference back when I was like, what did I even learn? And yeah, I think that one's really great. The Magic Art of Tidying. I am one of the people that actually genuinely enjoyed this book, so I understand why people didn't, and also it is one of those books that is like more of like a pep talk. Like it has some very simple essential ideas in it, and then it just explains to you different ways to demonstrate that idea. And when I was like, oh, I read this amazing book called The Magic Art of Tidying, and they're like, what's it about? And then I was like, oh, it's just get rid of the stuff you don't like. Something that I think I would recommend to other people who might not relate to like the way Maria Kondo's methods are phrased and doesn't really want the pep talk, they just want like straight discussion, is Goodbye Things. Because it's much more no nonsense, straight talking, like why overconsumerism is death and you just need to buckle down and let go of some of the stuff. And it's very like logical, and it's a much more kind of like pragmatic approach to decluttering, and I really, really enjoyed it. Feminists Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies. This is a book that is great. I am not gonna bash it in any way, but for me, reading it as somebody who'd already consumed quite a lot of feminist text, that makes me sound like such an arsehole. As somebody who's already consumed several feminist texts, one of the things that makes this book great is that it's really accessible and you can give it to somebody quite young and they'd really get it, or somebody who hadn't really learned that much about feminism and wasn't really on board. I feel really confident giving them that book and being like, just fucking read it. But for somebody who's like so persuaded, not perfect, definitely needs to learn more, something I'd recommend to my past self if I wasn't me was more along the lines of Laurie Penny's work or Rebecca Solnit's work or Roxane Gay's work. They're the three that I'd say. I'm still, like, some of Roxane Gay's like essays still not haunt me because they're good. Like, they kind of visit me again in my head, and when I'm having discussions with people, I can hear her voice being like, hang on a second. If you've got frustrated with Feminists Don't Wear Pink, or you don't think it's for you, I'd move on to stuff like that. Or if you have read Feminists Don't Wear Pink and you loved it, this is like extra reading for you, like other things to move on to and like keep digging in. Look, I love some Jane Austen, I do. This lie, this light, this light, this light. Ah, finally. To be raptured. What took you so long? Take me up. I don't know what this light is doing, but we're gonna carry on. Austen, she's not for everyone. I'm a mega fan, but I don't know if she's as universal as everybody paints her to be. There are like lots of people I know who don't really like her, and that's so okay. I would hate though for you to miss out on all of the upstairs, downstairs kind of drama, delicious period, old house kind of books just because you don't like Jane Austen. Somebody that I'd really recommend is Kazuro Ishiguro, particularly Remains of the Day, which obviously has been written in a more modern context, but it's really about, I think I'm gonna use this light. Right, I think that means it's time for a tea break. Let's just take a sun intermission, a sun intermission. Oh, it's too bright. Okay, we've been teed. The sun has eased a little bit. It's almost like it's trying to rapture me and failing. Where was I? Kazuro Ishiguro, Remains of the Day. Every book that Kazuro Ishiguro writes is absolutely completely fucking different. He's an author that I recommend by book, not his whole complete works, because there's just no way of being able to recommend you somebody with that breadth of style. But if you were going into Jane Austen thinking, this is my jam, I'm gonna love this, everybody loves this, and you were disappointed, I would highly recommend Remains of the Day. It's set in a slightly later period, obviously. It's set after the Second World War and then retrospectively looks backwards at this very essentially Victorian man's life. But it's about a guy who is a butler and has come from a long line of butlers and is coming to terms with the idea that perhaps in this new modern world, butlers aren't required. What's clever about this book is it looks back very intelligently and analytically through the eyes of a character who is incredibly naive at the politics of upstairs, downstairs in history and whether it makes sense to bring that forward, which is an incredible plane to land. I don't know how he does it through the eyes of somebody who is so incredibly for the system of butlering, but it's so beautifully written, it's so atmospheric. You'll still get that like old house kind of experience, but it also interrogates the class system within that and our ability to be human around our obsession with traditions and how nostalgia and belonging feeds into tradition. And this is making me want to read the book again. Focus, Lena, you've got to finish the video before you pick it up. But anyway, and it's also, some people sell it as a love story, and that really frustrates me because it's so not. It does feature a love interest, but when I saw the trailer for the film, I was just like... But at the same time, if you're somebody who was looking to Jane Austen for the whimsy of like a will they, won't they romance, that is in there. But like, I don't know if you've seen Never Let Me Go, but Kazuro Ishiguro isn't one for giving you the easy, happy ending, so you have been warned. Go back to Myron McFarlane if you want some guaranteed glee at the end of your books. Also, I really just want a t-shirt that says, "We are all Miss Kenton." We are all Miss Kenton. I just want to shake her and be like, we've been there. Just leave. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense to you. Wow, this is a long video, hey? But I mean, I've got nowhere to be, you've got nowhere to be. We don't even know the value of being places anymore. Gone Girl. This is a thriller. Yes, I read it and I got a thriller. But again, it was fine. And I kind of like, from the kind of like, oh, really exhausting, but you know, kind of enticing ways it was described, like feisty female lead. Why does it draw me in when it's also so gross? Like I guess I thought this was a thriller that was going to, and it kind of did, like explore the sharp edges of crime and women, and it kind of did that. But I also think that's a massive feature of crime now. It's not something that is that revolutionary anymore. And I just thought it would take it further and it didn't. But anyway, I don't really, to be fair, I don't want to criticise the book because I read it so long ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, that I actually just don't really, I only have, you don't remember what somebody said, but you remember the way they made you feel. But when I read The Power by Naomi Alderman, I was like, this is what I've been searching for. Instead of it being more crime focused, it's more dystopian focused. It's more dystopian. Yeah, it's got a really great side order of dystopia. You should so go there. Great canapes. It's got a side order of dystopia instead of crime, but it's still very much a thriller, and it follows a few different female characters who all get this power, and it spreads to the rest of the women in the world, where they basically have the power to like touch a man and basically kill and torture him. And it's how the power balances in various countries and societies are disrupted by this sudden emergence of this new genetic mutation that means that women are now as powerful physically or more powerful than men. And it is brutal and terrifying and thrilling and edge of your seat, definitely don't read it before bed kind of writing. So if you're looking for that, it's there. But if you really do want to stick to the crime stuff and you're not so much into the gory, really terrifying stuff, then a good like female-led crime book is The Darkness by Ragnar Jónasson, who's an Icelandic writer, or like anything by Denise Miner. The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer, who's a writer that I love, and this other book I read called Juliet Takes a Breath, kind of exist in the same universe. And I don't think like are at odds with each other, and I wouldn't say like, oh, if you didn't get stuff from The Female Persuasion, you'll get stuff from Juliet Takes a Breath, or the other way around. But I feel like they're perfect to read together, and if you've read one and not the other, I'd recommend reading one of them. Does that make sense? The Female Persuasion is a really beautifully written book from... Oh, the light is back. That's cool. Come join us. Do you want a book recommendation, God? Yeah, sorry, I wasn't a fan of yours. Not so much. I read it a few times though, just to check. Waiting on the sequel. Anyway, The Female Persuasion is about a girl who gets the opportunity to work for her favourite older feminist, like somebody who's represented a few different waves of feminism and introduced a lot of new stuff and is very prolific. And it's about her as a young woman leaving her life behind to follow this older feminist. And it's all of the complications that come with idolising somebody who is from a different era and doesn't understand the newer challenges you're facing. It's all about consent and control and self-determination, and how we can sometimes regurgitate what we've learned without really inspecting what it means to the real people around us. And it's really cool. It's kind of like written in the tone, it's very similar in tone, I think, to Girl, Woman, Other, in that it's kind of like hovers above the characters and has this like way of telling it that's really immersive and also gives you the background story to everybody's lives. And similarly, but written for a YA audience, Juliet Takes a Breath is about a Puerto Rican lesbian younger girl who gets swept up in the world of a very famous feminist who, again, embodies all these tropes of like having changed women's futures for the better and written all these prolific books. This light, man. Hello? Okay, I might have fixed some of it. I hope that's okay. And it's different from The Female Persuasion in that it more focuses on this person's reawakening of sexuality and coming out on top of idolising this famous feminist that actually kind of doesn't have all the answers and really has more of an understanding of womanhood as focused on menstrual cycles and like intrinsic womanhood, and goes into like TERF territory. And it's her kind of like realising this isn't quite what intersectional feminism is, and how she negotiates race into that as well. So I think that it's also a really interesting discussion, obviously aimed at like a slightly younger audience. So if you read The Female Persuasion and you were missing that intersectional element, I think Juliet Takes a Breath covers that more and like really discusses that, whereas The Female Persuasion dips more into consent and loss and the consequences of being wrong and grieving that. The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is fine. This book is fine. I preferred the film.
I preferred the film.
And it's not to say that it's a bad book, I just didn't, and again, it's just how it made me feel. I read it so long ago that I don't really remember, but I was thinking about like what else I'd recommend to somebody who was disappointed by that or didn't really like vibe with it, and I was you know, never not recommending Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. It's still a coming of age story about not being able to communicate and not fitting in and feeling like you're in the background, but also layers on discussions of masculinity and race and how we map ourselves onto other people, and kind of has like normal people vibes in that it is so intrinsic in its investigation of like one really intimate relationship, and it's just so real. It's just so real. Dante. And that's all that we have time for. I'm joking. There is an endless amount of time in this vortex of lockdown that I'm living in. Tell me about the books in the comments that were your Mr. Wickhams. Like, not quite what you were picturing, not quite what you were fantasying about. And then what was your Mr. Darcy? Like, what was the one that you were like, oh my God, it's you? I think that it's not always the reader's fault for like misunderstanding what a book is. Often they are kind of like skewed a certain way for commercial purposes. Like inherently all book covers are biased. It's just like the nature of book covers, and the same with descriptions of books. They're all tweaked for different audiences and different regions, and often if you read editions of books with different covers or for different audiences or in different countries, they're gonna emphasize something different about the book. So I always think it's really interesting to work out why I thought something was the way it was when it was something else. And that's also the value of reviews, I guess. Maybe like this video. Another service to humanity. Stop, Lena, stop. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you particularly to the Gumption Club who make these videos possible. If you'd like to be one of the people to join the Gumption Club, they're a merry band of lovely humans who tip me per video. And to say thank you, I add them to a secret Facebook group and we chat all the time and we have watch-alongs. I'm actually planning a secret project to thank you all in December. So if you want to be in on that from the beginning, I suggest you sign up now. It's as little as $1 per thing, and you can also cap it per month. So if you want to just give $1 per month, that is totally fine. You're an equal and welcome member of the Gumption Club. If you want to keep binging book videos, I've got some here. I've also got a tour of all my bookshelves here. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Frog's Dog out.